Hi, I'm Tara Hernandez, Vice President of Developer Productivity at MongoDB, Board of Directors for Women Who Code, and the founder of the Women Who Code podcast.
I'm Jael Lewitton, Senior Producer, Press and Digital Content for Women Who Code.
And I'm Kimberly Jacobs, Senior Communications Manager at Women Who Code, and I produce the recordings of Women Who Code podcast, specifically our conversations episodes that come out every Wednesday.
And today we're talking about the Women Who Code podcast. This is in celebration of the 1-year anniversary of the relaunch of the podcast, which has grown so much in the past year. But if we're going to talk about the Women Who Code podcast, then we really have to start with Tara Hernandez, who created it. Can you tell us about what inspired the podcast?
So this goes back to 2014 and having lunch with Elena Percival, who's the CEO of Women Who Code. And we were introduced by a mutual friend, or a mutual acquaintance, I guess, friend of mine, acquaintance of hers. We had lunch at Café Plouffe in San Francisco, which is this, unfortunately it's gone now. It didn't survive the shutdown, but it was this great little French restaurant in the financial district. And she's telling me about this nascent organization, about how to get better visibility and support for women in high-tech industry. And I was so inspired by that. And we kept the conversation going periodically. She encouraged me to get more involved in outbound advocacy, which I had not done before. All of the work that I had done at that point had been to support women within the companies that I was working in. At the time, I was working for a company in downtown San Francisco called Lithium. So I gave my first talk at the Connect conference that following year, I believe, in Seattle. And then she started talking to me about, this emerging idea of advisory board members and other ways for people to contribute. And obviously she, as in her role, was really looking for fundraising opportunities. And that's not something I had any knowledge about. And I felt, well, I can't be helpful in that regard. But then I thought around, I was thinking about the idea of here are these emerging communities that she's trying to support. What are things that we have at our disposal that can help with that sort of conversation? And a friend of mine had recently concluded a podcast he had run. So I took him out to lunch and picked his brain. And then I pitched it to Elena and she's like, sure, why not? So I didn't know anything about it. I had a notebook there. I just kind of took some notes, and I didn't really have a good, full disclosure, did not have a good plan. You hear from professional podcasters like, oh, we have our schedule built out a year in advance. And I would just be talking to people. I'm like, oh, that's a cool story. You want to do a podcast? And would organize it. Didn't have any tools, didn't have any software, didn't have any editing experience. I just went for it. The recordings were originally done using Google Meet, and then I would extract the audio. And I originally started using iMovie because it happened to be on my laptop. And I could use the visual part of the recording as kind of placeholders. And then I would extract the audio and publish that up. So, figuring out how to publish to Apple Podcast and then over to Android. And then I was doing that manually. And then I figured out, oh, now there's these services that you can pay money to. So the money that I paid to use those services like Hipcast and Zencaster, that was part of my contribution to the cause. But it was very much kind of a labor of awkward love the whole time. It was always a very challenging thing for me. It's not my bailiwick. But I did enjoy it as far as the process went, and it got pretty good reception, and I think people were really intrigued by the idea of like, here are just these random people telling their stories that happen to be women who happen to be in tech, and so I felt like, all right, there's something here to follow up on.
Why do you think it was important to have a tech podcast for women?
Most podcasts at the time, and actually probably even now still, tech podcasts really tend to be done by people who are naturally extroverted. And statistically, they tend to be male, not completely. There's plenty of women out there as well, but you just weren't hearing a lot of variety of voices. Or if there were podcasts that might have women, might be one woman, and they would be topic specific, or it would really only be about executive level and up. Right. And I felt that there was a lot of stories that could be told more broadly than that. And if Women Who Codes charter is broadly about women of all types within high-tech industry, around software development as a career, that there was probably a real opportunity for people to hear something that they could relate to more concretely, right? And what benefits could that be? And it did really inspire a lot of people. Who are like, hey, it never occurred to me to do this, but could I tell my story? Or I know someone who has a good story to tell.
I know that you creating the podcast really inspired me because after a while, we ended up relaunching it.
Right.
And I remember the first time I heard about the podcast, because I've always listened to podcasts. I listen to them constantly. Whenever I'm doing anything that doesn't require like super focus, driving or whatever. And the first time I heard that Women Who Code had a podcast, it was like so cool. It was pretty early on, right? 2016, maybe?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like really early on. And, I was a freelancer for the company at the time, and I was just like so excited to hear about it and just to download and be like, oh, wow, the company I work for has a podcast. And it was great. It had all these inspiring stories. And I always wanted to, I'd always hoped that we could do more with it, but we were a tiny little company. And
I think that was a really interesting challenge because, on the one hand, Elena and I are like, well, maybe we could get some sponsors, but managing sponsors is really hard. And it's like, this is something I'm doing on the side, and Women Who Code didn't have the ability at the time. So I think we had one sponsor who was interested, but we never were able to kind of close the loop on that. And I was just like, never mind. Right. And I was perfectly happy to continue to pay out of pocket just as part of my, contribution. But yeah, it's to go from a very kind of lightweight, low cost, but also low impact podcast to see what happens versus having a lot of intention around strategy. There's a really big investment jump as far as time and resources to do that. So I'm really pleased that it's now part of the core of Women Who Code, where it always belonged in the first place. It took a while to get there.
Could only get there with your vision, seeing that possibility in the future. And that's amazing. That's so cool. And I guess we should talk a little bit about the relaunch real quick. The relaunch
production value is vastly better. Let me just call you out on that. It's so much better.
I would say that, we relaunched 1 year ago, and we did it, from HQ with the whole Women Who Code team behind it. And it really started when, I had always been thinking about it, certainly, and really started with Tara, but also as soon as Kimberly joined the company. She joined Women Who Code about a year ago. And when she did, she brought a whole new level to the communications team. And she just really brought us up to being more sophisticated and having another level of being able to work on things. And it coincided with the entire team growing, like Women Who Code in, I think, 2 years, it like quadrupled or more in size in just the employees, not to mention the community, which has ballooned to a huge amount. And when Kimberly joined, we also had Shanita, who was a social media manager, and Sarah, who was also on social media, and who have both gone on to do great things. And suddenly it went from being, a tiny company to a company with teams in it. And a team makes a real difference. Like, I think it was amazing. We were doing these blogs, and we were doing this content, and it was great. We were getting written content from these amazing people in tech, these amazing women that were doing awesome things, super inspirational, great technology information, great awesome stuff. And often what we were doing was we were recording the conversations we were having with them, and then transcribing them into these awesome blogs. And then we realized, well, we're recording these conversations with them, and they're really good conversations. We should tell people about them, and that was just like, that was just the beginning. And now it's all about let's talk about all the cool stuff Women Who Code is doing. Let's talk about all the cool people in our community, all of the amazing, inspirational, outrageously just awesome people, and highlight them and spotlight them and turn them into stars. And that's really what it was all about. And so, we started editing videos, and we started recording videos, and we started doing all that. And I'd really love to hear, Kimberly, from you about what your role was in that relaunch.
Yes, thanks, JL. So I will say, like, Tara starting the podcast made it easier to pitch the relaunch because we had something to work with already. We had an infrastructure. And just in general, Women Who Code really had a great foundation in place. Like you mentioned, JL, we had the blog where we were recording the interviews already and turning them into blogs. We had the podcast already, although it hadn't been produced in a while. And then also we had IG Lives that we did during Connect Reimagine, which is another thing that sparked the idea too in relaunching the podcast for me, because it's like we're doing the live IG during Connect Reimagine at the time when I first started. We have the blogs, we have this, like, let's just make this a thing. And then also with the growth of the team, it also just like helped skyrocket it to the next level as well. Like I just remember actually we relaunched on September 30th, but Shanita and Sarah, they started September 20th, and creating the copy and the design was part of their like first
Trial by fire.
yeah, literally that was their first like major assignment. And it was funny because, well, it's not funny actually. It was just like so inspiring for me because it was like knew I couldn't take it to the level that they did. And when I saw that final product and just like the copy they wrote for social media, the graphics that Sarah created for social media and for the cover, like it really was a sentimental moment for me in our team meeting at that time, because I was just like, wow, we're about to like do some amazing things as a team and with the podcast. Like it was just like a foreshadowing for the growth we've had over the last year. So yeah.
And I'm so relieved, honestly, that happened. You know, for me, when we went into pandemic and we're working from home, and circumstances for me changed at the time I was at Google, and I went into that, never stop working. And I would be up early talking to Europe and up late talking to India. And then, and my family is like, hello, you're working from home. We should see you more, not less. And then it was, finding that creative energy to try and, on top of all of that, put some energy into the podcast. I'm sitting there every week going, I should do something for the podcast. I can't do it. I can't do it. And I think that first year, I think all of us, sort of the energy levels went down. I reached out to people, and we just kind of lost the momentum there. And so when JL and you reached out, and you guys started it up again, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. It's saved. Right. But I think that so many things changed in 2020 for the better. And so to see this kind of like, it's our phoenix from the ashes, right, to bring it back. So it made me super happy.
That's a perfect way to describe it. Just rising back out from the ashes and coming to life, and then coming to life in such a way. And two, Tara, you were one of our first guests on the podcast representing Google. And we had such an amazing conversation with you. And I remember like recording that with you and Joey, who just like also is very great interviewer, and just being in awe. Like my mouth was open the whole time. Mind you, I don't have a tech background. I have a journalism background. So from a storytelling point of view, everything that you were talking about, I was like totally engaged, which also is the great sign of a great podcast, because it's more than just for women in tech, but anyone who just loves to hear inspiring stories, no matter your tech background or not. Everyone tells their story in a way where anyone can understand, including my non-tech self. So yeah, and just the vast knowledge that all the women who participate every week share, and their journey, and it's relatable too from a career point of view as well, because although like the what we do is different, the career journey has similarities as far as, seniority level, learning how to project manage, talking to your managers, and just things of that nature are cross industry information to an extent. So, yeah.
Absolutely. There's more to tech than just code. I mean, the organization is Women Who Code, and we do, right? But we do more, and all of them are really interesting. And I think that also understanding that tech is often viewed as this weird island, right, of nerds, but it's actually just like any other industry and should be as accessible as any other industry for all kinds of women.
I totally agree. I think the other thing that makes it unique as well is like the diversity of women that it showcases. And it's not even just like diversity by ethnicity, because, that's what people think of first, but the journey is diverse. The age, the location, the culture, even the technology is diverse. Like these women have different backgrounds in tech, which also adds to it being so interesting as I listen to each and every interview. And yeah, just being a global organization and just reiterates who Women Who Code is and what we stand for. Going into the relaunch, I do want to just touch on some of the things that it took to get the relaunch done. To Tara's point, it is a lot of work. And we don't want to belabor like everything that goes into it, but I will say like it really does take a team. My part of getting the podcast created is working with our communications team, but also our programs team and partnerships team. So the partnerships team sources participants who share their stories, and the program team sources interviewers. And I think it was just like a perfect meld for our members to be able to partake and ask the burning questions that people who love the specific tech that these women are a part of, or the part of the industry that they're a part of, asking those questions that that they want to know. Like I said, I don't have a tech background, so I am sometimes like, can you break this down for me and help me understand? And it always comes out really, really great. I love how 99% of the time, both participants have great chemistry. So it really does flow as a conversation. And there's just general excitement, the authenticity of the storytelling part that's added to it and everything. Like that's kind of the key things that bring the interview together and get it to a point where it's able to be edited and passed on to JL, who takes on that part and so much more once the recording is done. JL, can you speak to your portion too?
So I would say that my role is really to continue evolving the podcast, which sounds really silly, but it kind of is, because yes, the podcast gets we produce original content, which is usually conversations, which is what our initial show was. The podcast is now 3 shows a week instead of 1, which is kind of cool. And my role has been to take the video. I do editing. I had to learn editing for this. I had to learn audio editing. I've had to learn YouTube and YouTube marketing and podcast marketing and all that stuff. But beyond that, I've also really been intrigued as we've continued this process by the fact that Women Who Code is an organization that produces so much amazing content. We're traditionally a programming focused organization. We put out 5 events every single week that are completely free. And you can go, online right now and learn about Python or mobile or front end or UX, UI, whatever you want, and learn it. And we're putting this content out. And so what I've started doing, and what we've started evolving the podcast into, is to be something that's more community based, where it's not just we're highlighting our members. Absolutely, we should highlight them, should make them, I want to make them movie stars. I want to make all of them absolutely, top stars. But also the programming that they're putting out is now going to become part of the podcast. And so this is part of our commitment to accessibility, where if you want to learn something in a live session with people and a chat and all that, you can do that. If you want to learn that same thing from a YouTube video, because that's what's comfortable for you, you can do that. If you want to put your earbuds in and drive around and listen and learn something, great. If you want to read it in our blog, you can do that. Any way that you want to access our content anytime, it's there. And that's really what I consider to be the big part of my role, is directing the coordination that we're doing with programming and the production levels that we're adding to certain things, and the way that we're just shaping this podcast to be community building, completely accessible education resource for the entire community and the entire world.
I 100% agree. And you are the brains behind like the expansion and the thought and the strategy of this for sure. So spot on.
Yeah, I can't agree more. The accessibility aspect of it, and being able to, for any variation, because you can imagine, maybe not strong English speakers might want something written they can translate, or something in YouTube where they can get built-in translations, or just preference, but making it so that everybody's ideal scenario is supported.
And that content is always available. It's a content library. You can get it live, or you can come and learn later and continue to learn, and then continue to grow with the community. And just, that's what Women Who Code is. And that's why the podcast is cool, because Women Who Code is really cool.
Yes, it is. Amen.
And our members are brilliant. Like,
Yes.
They bring so much brilliance to each other, to the community. And then on top of that, like, they're growing at the same time. So they're just becoming more brilliant. And yeah. So as we just like continue to talk about this, like some of our interviews, so we have the different shows, as we mentioned, and the podcast is like kind of evolved in a few different ways over the last year. But one of the first evolvements of it from the source participant and member has been also the Team Till interviews. And then from that, we started to call the episodes, this like particular show, I should say, Women Who Code Conversations. And it was inspired by our Women Who Code Turns 10 campaign this year. And it incorporates like video interviews between two Till members and members of our community, just talking about very specific topics. One of the first ones was with Elena and Joey, just really talking about how Women Who Code became what it has over the last 10 years and the journey together. Elena, our CEO, and Joey, our president. That was like such a great conversation between them, and just kind of showing their dedication and commitment to the mission. And in general, we wanted it to feel like just conversations and not this stiff, like, I ask a question, you answer. I ask a question, you answer type of feel, but really just like talking together. And I think it's also just another reiteration of how our community interacts with each other as well. Some other episodes and topics that come to mind too that were really great, which all of them are really, really great. I think I just was like surprised by some of the things I learned through these particular interviews. Was like the Mother's Day interview with Yvonne, from a director from one of our Latin American communities, and Joey, our president. They talked about being a mother in tech and the impact of COVID and a lot of things, and how they've actually excelled tremendously through motherhood, which is not surprising. But so many times, like, the propaganda, I guess, that is put out there is that like being a mother ends your life and slows you down and all those type of things. So that was really awesome. And then also conversation with Sierra and Vui, also members in our community, and just like how volunteering has led to them elevating in their careers, and also just like how they've created community amongst themselves and with their networks locally and abroad. And yeah, like they were just very inspiring. So I would say go back and listen. And a lot of the themes that flow through all of those interviews, even the ones I'm not mentioning, is like community and being able to ask for help and advice, and also just feeling more confident throughout their career journey. Well, what about you, JL? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it was the first iteration of what would become the 3 shows that we're producing each week, which is Women Who Code Conversations, Women Who Code Talks Tech, and Women Who Code Career Nav. And I think that us evolving to having 3 shows a week and possibly even more in the future, who knows? I'm not allowed to talk about it. But yeah, I think that that's really an important evolution for us to produce the kind of content that people want to hear specifically, and to meet people where they are and where they want to be.
I remember in for a while, we were trying to reach out and get some of the network leadership on the early podcasts. And I remember this 2 really great episodes where one was with Lisa Smith, who was Rally Durham Network, and she was talking about some of the brunching. She's like Southern Charm. It's all about the brunches, and that really kind of what that community needed more than anything was that strong sense of kind of personal community to help. That Rally Durham was a more nascent tech hub, as opposed to talking to the Silicon Valley network directors, Akansha and Anju and Michelle at the time. And it was one of I think they're still one of the largest, but at the time I think it was second largest by membership, and just the pure volume of technical content, which was the main focus. And so that idea of also the podcast as a medium for ongoing sharing of ideas in our, the all important volunteer and member communities. I think, you all have taken it with the relaunch and put a little bit more structure around that idea, but we definitely saw, some of those topics emerging as things that people were definitely interested in.
That's really cool. That like, apparently the vision was there all along, and just.
Well, it wasn't a vision. I think it's as more of an evolving understanding that we had, as a group. So,
well, I mean, we definitely picked up on that too. I mean, the topics immediately started to emerge that were very much desired.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Just the natural alignment from what you started, Tara, to now, like in all the different topics, it's really been a seamless alignment over this past year plus.
It's funny. I think it's a good analogy for how I work. I do infrastructure engineering and overseeing an organization out at MongoDB. But I always tell my engineers, like, I never implement the final product. I implement prototypes, and then y'all, you go off and make it real. And so I think Women Who Code Radio, with the first version, that was the prototype, and now we've got the real deal, and it's fun to see.
I love that. Yeah, I really love that. I think also back to kind of like your brunch point too, is like we incorporated this aspect of asking them to talk about things they do outside of work as well, because we are all human, and showcasing like the great things that we do outside of work, I think was very important to me as I joined the team, because I think when you talk about women and like the awesomeness that we are in general, you can't talk about what they do for work without really having insight into how cool they are outside of work too. And I always love the answers, like, I've heard everything from mountain biking to traveling to being a soccer mom, and like having support dogs and volunteering different places. Like, I just love the added diversity in that as well. And that women technologists are not a monolith. Like they're
No.
not just sitting there reading books and coding all day. They're out living life just like everyone else can imagine. And you're among technologists all the time and may not know in the outside world. So I think that's another great thing that is pulled forward through the podcast. JL, do you have any favorite episodes?
I think that all of the episodes of the podcast are great, obviously.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of cool ones. There's been a whole lot of cool ones. I know the one that Tara was on was awesome. We already mentioned
Oh,
that.
amazing.
And
Yeah.
just off the wall, really good. I know we've had a bunch with our volunteers. You mentioned the one with Vui and Sierra, but I remember the one with Mackenzie and Sapphire where they were taping it and they were so nervous and they were just so, and it came out so good. And those are both now team members. And it was just really cool to see how that turned out and their story about how they came to be with Women Who Code and participate. And then, recently we did one on using crypto to help LATAM communities overcome financial problems, which I just thought was like, I've written on it a couple of times for Women Who Code, and I thought that's what we do, using cool technology to overcome problems, and yeah, that's excellent. And we even I remember it was National Geology Day, and we were like, oh, what kind of episode could we do? Oh, we'll do something generic, and then we're like, oh, somebody knows a geophysicist. Okay, let's have Natasha Hendricks on. That's cool. But Tara, what were some of your favorite episodes?
So the ones that I think enjoyed the most was episodes 1 and 12. Both were around career transitioners. And in episode 1 we had people who had been mathematicians and lawyers evolving in tech, and then we had even more fun from a kind of a divergence perspective. We had professional musicians who were both boot campers, and I love that. It's like, people in tech can come from anywhere and can thrive. And in the music episode, we actually had some of the music that they had produced in the episode, which was also super fun. And I think my close second was, and this was something I had hoped to do every year, and unfortunately it ended up not happening, but I was interviewing random people at the Connect conference, and we had a little sofa, a stage, and we would just pull people up out of the event center and then put those blurbs together. That's when I learned how hard it is to do editing. I'm not very good at it. But it was a lot of fun, and to see the enthusiasm of people getting excited about, oh yeah, I got a little blurb in the podcast. So yeah, I miss it in a way, but I'm glad to see it in much better, more dedicated hands.
I've heard about that podcast, the podcast booth at the conference. JL shared that with me. We were going to try to replicate that, but it's harder to do digitally. But yeah, so it's so awesome just to hear the growth over time and just like some of the things that make Women Who Codes podcast so awesome and unique, and really connects with our audience and our listeners. JL has mentioned a little bit about how the podcast has grown over time. I do want to just touch on that just briefly, about the next phase of the podcast and, what we see for the future.
Or are we allowed to talk about that? Because we have such big plans. I mean, there are,
We can hint to a couple of things.
I mean, will it be coming to a TV near you? I don't know. Will there be, an increase in shows, and will there be more original content, and will there be some really cool guests? Maybe. I don't know. We can't promise anything. That would be foolish. But we can definitely say that there's really cool stuff coming. There are big visions. The Women Who Code has always thought really, really big. I mean, that's how we've grown so fast and in such a short time. And we have not stopped thinking big. This podcast is going to just evolve more and more and more. And it can't help it because Women Who Code's community is just so vibrant and amazing that we have to showcase it. And so we are going to make all of our members stars. You're all going to be in Hollywood. You're all going to be on the red carpet. And that is the plan for the podcast going forward.
And I'll leave that there. That was the perfect way to say that and wrap that up. So the final thing is, what are each of our pro tips for podcasting based on our experience so far? I'll start. For me, I just think from a storytelling point of view, authenticity is key. I just love when you just show up and you're just yourself and you just tell your experience and your story. I think that always is going to resonate with members and other women outside of the community.
So for me, I think the biggest lesson I learned was knowing nothing about it. It takes about 5 times longer than you think it's going to. Preparation is really key, and editing is really challenging.
I would say just remember that with the podcast, you have a global audience. You're not just talking to yourself or to one person or to the people you know, you're talking to everybody. And so be aware of that and try to make what you say just open to everyone who might be hearing it and inspiring to everyone who might hear it and welcoming to everyone who might hear it.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a pleasure talking to the two of you. Thank you so much, Tara, for joining us and just for starting the podcast and laying out that foundation and blueprint for us. And JL, we are like the dynamic duo and then the dynamic comms team in general with Sharnita and Sarah as well. Yeah. Any final words?
Keep it going. It's great.
Thank you.
WWCode.com/podcast. Sign up to be a guest. You can be a star. You have something to teach. Come and listen. You have something to learn and join the community. WWCode.com.